Yeah, what were like the first steps that you took to start Lean?
So first thing I did is started talking to people about it. I've never been one to, hide an idea and then like big reveal. It's just more like, hey, what do you guys think about this problem? Like, what's going on? And start talking to gig workers and talked to about, I don't know, 100 or so gig workers. Just spent literally like 2 months every day just talking to gig workers and like, hey, how's it going? Like, how do you deal with this? How do you deal with this? Like, how does this look? Like, how do you feel? Like, um, anything that they're willing to share, just taking notes on, ran a couple of surveys to understand how they prioritize different problems, because I listed off a whole bunch of them, right? And the ones I left out were health insurance, HSAs, 401ks. All these things are very difficult to attain if you're not working for an employer or a traditional employer. So that was step one. Step two was then saying, all right, there's something here. There's these like problems that need to be solved. Number one was liquidity for gig workers. It was, how do I get paid faster? How do I get more money? Number two was, number one and two were, how do I get paid faster and how do I make more money? Number three was, how do I get access to like better health insurance that has lower deductibles? Number four was around housing and mortgages and rentals. And number five was on taxes. And I was actually surprised to find taxes so far below, because anybody that's a 1099 gig worker has to pay taxes 4 times a year. But after I thought about it, it wasn't as surprising. Having been so close to TurboTax, one thing you learn very quickly is nobody wants to think about taxes. You want to automate the hell out of that. And so that's why I think that was at the bottom. But so we started with the first two. And it was like, all right, well, how do we do this, right? In order to solve this problem, we got to get to gig workers. How do we get to gig workers? Well, who has the most gig workers? Gig companies. Okay, well, let's start talking to them. Do they care about this? And I started talking, I called all my friends at various gig companies and just started having conversations around this. And I started to find out staggering statistics. Gig companies on average see about 500% turnover. And so this is people that deactivate and reactivate their entire, like the equivalent of their entire base multiple times a year, deactivates and reactivates, which ends up costing a ton to try to create a stable company with a supply side and a demand side, where the supply side continues to fluctuate. And demand side does as well, but the supply side is a little bit harder to lock down because it's people's time, it's people's days, right? And a lot of it was being solved with incentives and like throwing money at the problem, which is what big companies do, and sometimes it works. And one statistic on the business side that shocked me was Uber spent 2.5 billion on retention and acquisition costs in 2019, which is crazy to me. Like that's just an insane number. And so I started to realize that there's something here, right? Like there's a particular type of behavior that exists, right? When you want flexibility, you're working for a need. And when your need is not fulfilled, you're going to go everywhere you possibly can to try to fulfill that need. So you're gonna gig for 10 different companies. You're going to take a shift here, or if you're a healthcare worker, you're going to take a month-long shift here, and then you go to another company and take a month-long shift here, just because that pays the best, that has the best outcome for you. But the companies, on the other hand, feel the pain of that, right? Because they're no longer have people that they can lean on, and they're trying to just throw money at the problem, try to fix it. But what if these companies were able to solve those problems for the people and maintain that flexibility, but actually give them what they needed rather than just throwing money at the problem? Just throw thinking at the problem. And there was this really interesting model in Southeast Asia with this company called Grab, which is like, now it's more than that, but it's like the Uber of kind of that market, and they're very big, but they decided to go really deep into like banking and financial services for everyone on their supply side and then everyone on the demand side, and it became an extremely successful business. It took them 3 years of building and iterating and trying to figure out what this thing looked like. But as of the end of 2020, they raised a round specifically for Grab Financial Group, which is what that business was, at a $3 billion valuation. That's how valuable that single service was to Grab. And Uber saw that, and Uber tried to do it in the US. The guy that was running it, his name is Peter Hazelhurst. He and I were talking the very origin of lean. And Peter was talking about some of the things that he had learned at Uber, trying to build this for Uber's workers. And the big takeaway from that, Uber ended up shutting down that program in the summer of 2020 because it's really hard to build this type of program. And it's not just hard, it's risky, right? Like when you're a marketplace and you have a particular type of business, and you start to introduce financial services, nobody really looks at the marketplace side because there's much lower risk on the marketplace side than there is on the financial services side. So suddenly a business that has like a 10x, 20x multiple on their revenue only has a 5x multiple on their revenue. So it directly impacts the company's valuation. It creates a whole lot of legal, compliance, regulatory functions that have to be built up, risk functions that have to be built up. It turns into this like 400-person business that now has to be run concurrently with the core business, which becomes a massive distraction. And there's a lot of heavy oversight on this side of the business as well. And when Uber was kind of looking at that, and they're like, all right, there's a lot of value we're already seeing, but we can't create another business. We're like in the middle, like the heart of this brand new pandemic at that point. What are we going to do? Create a different subsidiary that's a financial services company when our core business is already struggling right now? And Uber decided to shut it down because they couldn't sustain it. But what Uber ended up doing is they indicated that this is the path, but we don't know exactly how to do it. And when I was talking to Peter about what we were thinking about building, he's like, holy shit, this is like, Uber money in a box. Like anybody can turn it on, and anybody can turn on Grab Financial Group just like that and start getting lower cost, better services, better acquisition, better retention, and potentially revenue share in certain cases, and make this a revenue stream with like 2 weeks of work. That's like Lean's product basically, right? And he's like, oh my God, out of the box, that's crazy. How can you do this? And that was the challenge. How do we do this? And we figured it out, right? The way you do it is you go super deep on those things that nobody else wants to think about. You go super deep on legal structures. You go super deep on risk. Risk is one of the areas that prohibits financial services for a lot of people in this segment, because you have to rethink what risk looks like when someone's working day to day, when someone's working gig to gig. And so we went super, super deep on risk. My first person that I brought on was a risk expert. The second person I brought on was a counsel, like an attorney. And then not to mention all the external attorneys we were working with, but that was where we started. And imagine a startup starting with that. Like, like, hey, you want to work in this organization that's all about risk and legal? You superstar, rock star engineer. And the really smart ones get it. They're like, oh my God, you figured out the most complex part of the business. Yes, absolutely, I want to join that. But most people are like, what? Why is your organization so heavy risk and legal? And so it was interesting building out the team in the order that I built it out, because never in my career had I built out a team in that order. And it was fun, and structuring the product based on what we could do, understanding what we could do, pushing the boundaries of what we could do for this segment of workers.